You know that Keeley Companies is all about fostering the world-class culture through their incredible cultural pillars. Well, it was time to add a seventh cultural pillar, Keeley Green. Guided by the mission to raise the sustainability standards by which they design, build, operate, and live, Keeley Green is dedicated to using a holistic approach to leave a positive impact on our environment, create a future that is sustainable for generations to come. In the words of Rusty Keeley, we are just getting started. You can learn more about that just getting started mentality and all the work they do by visiting my friends at Keeley Companies online at keeleycompanies.com.
Welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. John is the #1 national best-selling author of the book On Fire. He's a world-class inspirational speaker, and he's the host of the Live Inspired podcast. John interviews extraordinary individuals on their life story so that you can wake up from accidental living and more fully live your life story. Here's your host, John O'Leary.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Live Inspired podcast with John O'Leary. So today's guest shares my name. That's awesome. But I think you're going to fall in love with his heart, with his story, and with what it means for you. His name is John Register. John is a 2-time Paralympian. He's a silver medalist. He is a Persian Gulf veteran, and he's a TEDx motivational speaker. He's also someone who knows what it means to lose everything you plan for and how to build something even more meaningful in its place. A rising Olympic hopeful, John's dreams were shattered by a tragic accident that led to the amputation of his left leg. What followed wasn't just recovery, but a reinvention of his identity, his purpose, and ultimately his impact. Today, John joins us to share how he, in quotes, amputated the fear of disability, found new purpose, and learned to thrive in a life that he never expected. His experiences challenge us to reflect on how we respond to life's inevitable curveballs and how we can become someone still after those curveballs that are even better versions of ourselves than we imagined possible. My friends, if you ever faced an unexpected detour in your life, or you ever felt like your best days were behind you, well, today this conversation with John is for you. You will leave with renewed hope, a fresh mindset, and a reminder that your scars might just be the beginning of your greatest legacy. So my friends, get ready to applaud my friend, now yours. His name is John Register. John, my friend, welcome to Live Inspired with John O'Leary.
John, I have been a longtime fan, and I love the title Live Inspired. Happy to get in this conversation.
Well, man, if I had to have a poster of what it means to live inspired, it would not be John O'Leary. It would be John. It just would not be O'Leary. It would be John Register. And I think people are probably laughing as they drive to work or work out or worship right now, hearing that. And by the end of the podcast, they're going to realize O'Leary was being honest. Your story is wild. It is packed with a lot of ups and a lot of downs. And yet, as I look at you today, you've got a ton of joy on your face and in your life. So for those of you who are meeting you for the very first time, if you had to introduce yourself, the old cocktail question, what do you do for a living? John, what do you do for a living? Tell me about you.
So when people have a challenge and they need to revisit that challenge or revise that challenge and make a commitment to the new vision, but they can't. There's something that's holding them back from making that commitment. Or they've just made a commitment to whatever the new vision is, and now they realize that their back's against the wall and they don't know as much as they used to know. They're no longer the expert. Well, I help organizations, executive CEOs, to help them hurdle their adversities by amputating that fear, embracing a new normal mindset in order to win the medals that are in our lives, in their lives. And so we can unpack all of that, I'm sure, during the show.
Well, as you're going through that, I had not heard you say that verbatim, and every single one of those words has meaning in your life. And we will unpack that as we run this race together. So let's start with the fact that you and I were born in the same city. We don't live
That's
there.
right.
You moved on, man. I have not. My roots pulled me back to this community, but you were born in St. Louis. Tell me about your early upbringing.
My dad is retired now, Presbyterian minister. And there's a church over there that was right outside of town called Laclede Town, not Laclede's Landing, but Laclede's Town, which was a community that was really based upon communities all living together. It was an experiment to see if it would actually work with all these communities living together. And he was co-pastoring a church called Berea Presbyterian. And we lived on Kingsbury Street. I still remember the house that we had. I hated leaving that house because that's where I had like my first memories from running away from preschool, my first memories of the train ride at the zoo. And Delmar Station, where I got my first really big train ride on Amtrak, and the Admiral. We just talked about the Admiral, that great riverboat queen that was running up and down the Mississippi River. So, and the arch, of course. But those are my fondest and most earliest memories are right there in St. Louis.
Your father, just to add a little bit of context and intel on him, spent some time in a jail in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. We've had a whole lot of folks who've spent some time in prisons on this podcast, but not exactly for why your father was in that prison. What happened? What led him to be locked away?
So when we look at American history, most specifically 13, 14, 15 amendments, right? There is a time where African Americans who were slaves are now freed with those amendments, and they have voter rights. But there's been voter suppression that's been going on all the time. So after, of course, slavery ends, we have Jim Crow, we have all these rules and regulations that try to get people not to have access to the American dream. And so what they're doing down there with he was the only black clergy out of 9 white clergy who were in Hattiesburg. They were exercising or trying to get African Americans, blacks, the not the right to vote, but to exercise the right that they already had to vote, right? And so that was being suppressed. And so that's what they were doing. According to my dad, what happened was they were picketing and they were told to disperse, but they stayed there and they put their signs down on the opposite side of a string of a line. And that's what they were all arrested for. So he was jailed in Hattiesburg, Mississippi for civil rights to say, if you can vote, why can't I vote? I think,
Right.
the first line of our preamble to the Constitution is we the people of the United States of America, right? So that was what they were fighting for. And it was amazing when you see that, right? And then years later, he gets a commendation that comes into his church in Chicago, on the south side of Chicago, from the judge who is now the new judge in the same jail, that same precinct in the same city that he was jailed in. And she's an African American woman who says, I want to exonerate you. I want to present you this so that you are now expunged. He says, no, don't expunge my record. That proves I was in the fight. Right. So that's the gumption. That's the fervor that we have to defend something that so many have bled and died for. When I served the United States Army, it wasn't for a war, it was to protect the United States Constitution
Right.
against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Bear true faith and allegiance to the same, right? That's what I raised my hand to do, but we tend to forget some of those things.
So I just appreciate a little bit of the history on your dad and now a little bit on your mother. You've described her as your protector. What do you mean by that?
When my mom passed away 2.5 years ago, I was doing a lot of soul searching with what this woman meant to me in my life. And at every turn, I found that she was always not just in my corner, but a champion for it in her own way. I could see, for example, I was a baseball guy and I was a pretty good baseball player. I could bat, hit, field, but the high school coach, Jack Kaiser in Oak Park River Forest High School, he was not going to allow me to play baseball on that team for whatever his reasons were. And we found out later, her sleuthness found out that the baseball coach and the track and field coach had made a deal. And so he wasn't going to pick me for the baseball team, so I could go run track because they saw how fast I was in football. So she is the one that would continue to tell me the things that were going on that I had, my blind spots to protect me from the either hurt or from letdown or to help me advance forward with the knowledge and information that she knew. So she wanted to make sure that her baby boy was protected.
You mentioned football, you mentioned baseball, you mentioned track and field. I did all those things too. I just didn't do any of them well. When did you recognize that you weren't just playing the same sports John O'Leary played, but you were actually playing them at an elite level?
Yeah, I don't know when it actually clicked for me. I think I was at the Dallas Morning News Invitational in Texas. And I was the redshirt freshman for the University of Arkansas. I had just won the collegiate division of the high hurdles. And a gentleman in this beautiful tuxedo, he comes over to me, he's an official, and he hands me an invitation to come and compete that evening. I had no idea what that meant. And so on the van ride back from the Dallas Morning News Invitational, wherever they were hosting the meet, to our hotel for the afternoon break, Mike Conley, senior on the Arkansas team, he's driving the van and he says, "Hey, John, you know what that invitation means?" I said, "Absolutely not." He said, "You get a chance to come back here tonight and run against your heroes and role models, the one you have up on the wall at the University of Arkansas." And I got so excited and terrified at the same time. So I had a little 35 millimeter camera and I brought it back to the warm up area and I saw Ronaldo Nehemiah. Oh my gosh. Click. There's Greg Foster from Proviso East High School, one of the first hurdlers I had seen in my life. And he's like a township over from me on the west side of Chicago. Click. And then it was time for us to get in the blocks. So I get in, I'm in lane number 3. Ronaldo's in lane 1. I think Greg's in 2. And the announcer's voice comes over the loudspeaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to event number 53, the men's 55-meter high hurdles. In lane number 1, he has just been the only person to run under 13 seconds ever in this race. Please welcome back Ronaldo Nehemiah." Crowd goes wild. Lane number 2, he just set the world record at the Mirrors Games at this distance just last weekend. This is Mr. Gregory Foster. In lane number 3, John Register, University of Arkansas. In lane number 4, rolls right over my name. Now I'm ticked. So I get in the race and I get in the blocks. Gun goes off. I'm running as fast as I can. I want to show these guys who's boss. And as I approach the first hurdle, I swear to you, before I lift my leg over that hurdle, I am watching the best hurdle race of my life. And so I finished in dead last. And as I'm sitting down on the seat in this state of euphoric dissidence, a woman comes over to me and she sits down next to me and she says, "You know, young man, I saw you get that invitation that afternoon with the gentleman in the tuxedo. And I saw you come back here that afternoon and taking pictures of all your presumably heroes and role models. Uh, so, young man, and I saw you get dead last. And young man, you dishonored your invitation because that invitation was for you to come and compete. And you were idolizing instead of competing. You were idolizing instead of warming up. You're idolizing instead of doing what you need to do. So what you need to do, young man, is develop that film, put those people up as bullseyes, circle them, come back here next year, kick their butts." And she got up and walked out of my life forever.
Hmm.
And on the van ride back to Arkansas from Dallas, Mike said, "What was Jeanette Bolden talking to you about down there?" Now, Jeanette Bolden, gold medalist, 4x100-meter relay. And she had just breathed into me something that I could not see for myself. She says, "You're not only equal with these individuals, you can beat these folks.
Right.
You're not there to idolize. You're there to compete. You're there to win. You're there to represent your school." So that's when I realized that I had something,
Hmm.
that a gold medalist would come over and take some time to see in me what I could not see for myself.
Well, she saw it, and eventually you did too. You become a 3-time All-American. You become this world-class athlete, man. So you lived into that commitment of putting a bullseye around those guys and pursuing it. You graduate Arkansas, and then instead of taking a job, I think you had one lined up in Mississippi. You're ready to roll, man. Start counting that money. Instead of doing that, you enlist in the Army. Why?
2 reasons. Army has a world-class athlete program, and my recruiter said, "Well, if you join the military, we can try to get you into that program." And I looked at the regulations for it and said that as long as you are authorized that you make the Olympic trials, you can make this world-class athlete program and train for 2 years prior to the next Olympic Games. So I said, "Well, no guarantees, but I know that USA Track and Field is going to say I'm bona fide because I just made the Olympic trials in two different sports, right? Which means I made the Olympic standard." So that was one. 2, Alice and I were pregnant with our first child. and I had no money. And so I figured Uncle Sam could actually pay our bill and help us have a kid. And so those are two reasons I enlisted in the Army.
How did the Army, before you traveled overseas, was before Desert Storm and Desert Shield, how did the Army shape your character?
I didn't know anything about military service as far as my immediate family was concerned, except what you don't know is my uncle was also in charge of the March on Washington, 63. And so he was all in charge of all the platform speakers that day. So that's when Dr. Martin Luther King has the I Have a Dream speech, which was really not about his dream about that. It was about quality. It was about the Vietnam War. It was about education. It was about finances. And so that's what was rising up. And so walking across the parade field at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, I think it level set my thinking about what we all have done to advance America. And it made me appreciate the longevity of how I'm now walking across this parade field when so many other people have done this to protect that piece of paper, right? And the blood that was spilled and the sacrifice. I mean, in my case, Africans in America fought in every war to get their freedom, even when it was denied to them. Even in like World War II, when we see the Tuskegee Airmen going alongside bombers into Germany, we're seeing the tenacity and the precision of these pilots because pilots weren't able to make rendezvous points. Or they were cutting and running after the spoil, leaving the bombers. They did not leave those bombers. Didn't lose one bomber, not one bomber. Back and forth. So how many families are still together because those men sacrificed themselves and their aircraft to keep the mission of that Constitution intact, right? It was a powerful thing that I realized I was a part of this legacy. And that began to shift the way I thought about purpose, about my life. And if this is just about America, what more about me? How do I want to show up? What's the purpose that I want to have in life? And so I wanted to make sure that it was exacerbated by the name of Pat Enriquez in my veteran entrepreneurship class. She said, what's the most important thing in business? And we all had different answers. She said, the most important thing in business is how you're going to wrap your business up. That means you've been successful. Now you're just trying to figure out how to do it. So it puts you in a different mindset. So I said, what about the rest of my life? What do I want my life to signify? Purposeful. And it was clear as day. I want to hear my God say, well done, good and faithful servant. Enter now into the joy of my rest. So I'm going to do that. Matthew 6:33. Seek first God's kingdom and his righteousness, and all things shall be added to you. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to build upon a foundation that's already been laid with gold, silver, precious stones, or wood, hay, stubble, because every person's work is tried by fire. And I want to make sure that, as you know, in the fire, things burn. And if I'm building with wood, hay, and stubble, it burns up. If I build with gold, silver, and precious stones, it's refined. So every single thing that I'm thinking about is how do I add oxygen into the atmosphere for us to thrive in any environment that we show up in? How can I do that? So I'm about service. And that's how the military shifted me and changed me.
Big answer and a great one. So you become a servant leader. You begin oxygenating your life. You eventually retire out as a combat veteran now, but you haven't lost the itch to compete athletically.
So I am stationed now in Germany. After the war, I've gone to my second Olympic trials, which is the 400-meter hurdles. The Gulf War, I lost my rhythm in the high hurdles, so I was not able to run that race at the level that I needed to make an Olympic team. But I found a new race, the 400-meter hurdles. And in my fifth race ever, I qualified for the Olympic trials. So what those that are out there that don't know, when you make the Olympic trial standard in the United States, you have met the Olympic standard. So I could probably represent any other country, but in the United States, you have to go through a trials period.
And let me
So I
just
made that
let
standard.
people know this too. There is not a worse race in the world than the 400-meter hurdles. So, maybe John Register won't admit it, but O'Leary can. It is sprinting as fast as you can the entirety of a track while jumping over things that should not be in front of you.
Great race. Best race ever out there. It's a grueling race. It's a fun race. It's a mind race and physical. And so I knew with all the stuff I've been through in Arkansas and the highest level of competition, seeing people that have been on Olympic teams. It was just a matter of time. I just needed to get my body to do what it needed to do in order to make the Olympic Games. I finished up 17th in the Olympic trials in my sixth race ever in the event. So
Right.
I knew I was onto something, and I just needed to learn the race and then improve my time about zero point 0.3 to zero point 0.4 seconds every year. And I knew I'd be in the finals in the 1996 Olympic trials, and anything happens in the finals, as you know. But on
John,
May 17th, 1994,
that's exactly where I want to go, man.
I'm training in Hayes, Kansas for a race the next day. And the wind's blowing hard, and I misstepped the third hurdle in a practice session. And when I misstep the hurdle, I'm leading with my left. I come down awkwardly. My left leg snaps in half. It hyperextends, does like a backwards helicopter spin as I'm falling to the ground. And as I come to a halt on the ground, my left leg is now canted over across my right leg at the knee. So the patella has dislodged, and my foot is on the black surface of the track facing more towards my face. So if you can picture that, the foot and toe is toward my face and it's crossed over. It looks like the letter L. It looks like an elbow. And the head of the femur is trying to poke out from the skin. And I knew in that moment that I was not going to Olympic Olympic Games, let alone I know if I was going to have a career left in the military. And later, because the time lapse from getting me to triage, I was faced with either keeping my leg and using a walker or a wheelchair for the rest of my life, or undergoing an amputation and using a prosthesis for the rest of my life.
It just blows me away how quickly life turns. And yours happens to be around sports and the use of your leg and what you're going to do next. But in all of our lives come these moments on the day where it's just slightly windier than normal. And then the thing happens, the inflection point. So you have this massive injury and now this diagnosis. Hey, John, we've got two pathways forward, man. One is this leg will basically be disabled for the rest of your life, or we can amputate it. Which path did you choose?
So it didn't take me very long to choose the path of amputation because in my male deductive reasoning, I was saying if I can amputate the leg, I'll get rid of this pain. That was my male deductive reasoning. And after the amputation actually happened, I was in more pain than my male deductive reasoning had reasoned. And it was because of the phantom pains that were going on. And they would ebb and flow, but it felt like a knife was sawing at the back of my Achilles tendon
Wow.
constantly. It was the most excruciating thing. And it kept on getting worse because everything was trying to heal on the inside. It was horrific, not the injury, but just the pathway forward. Sometimes, as I said earlier, when we make the commitment, and the commitment is actually amputating what's no longer necessary for us and not being able to go back to it. You might have phantom pains to it, but you can't go back. Now you're into the frying pan into the fire because you're taking your first steps anew again, afresh again. And it's very difficult to do that because you can recall what the time was prior to you moving forward. You may want to reach out for those days, but that's not possible because you've crossed the chasm. There is a place where you can actually do that, and that's what I call the reckoning moment. When you have a desire to get things back and go back to the way they used to be. You're not moving forward. And you can kind of stay in this circle in the business community. You might hear a person on your team say, "Man, we've been doing this for 25 years. Why do we got to change now?" But once you make the commitment, now you got to get people on board and move them forward, and that is hard work. It's hard work. So I began doing the hard work, and uh, most people think that the amputation was the hardest day. It was not the hardest day. My hardest day was it was more mental than anything else. It came on June the 17th, 1994, and I was in the worst pain of my life up until that point. Would get worse. I was in my cousin's house in San Antonio, Texas, Brooke Army Medical Center, and she was nursing me back to health. She was gone, back to work, and I was in the house by myself, reeling in pain, just crying tears of pain. Just couldn't shake it. Couldn't sit down, couldn't stand up, and just pain was all around. And as I sat down on the couch again, I turned on the television to kind of distract my mind. And it was about 5-ish in the afternoon, I would think. And there's this newscast that's on. and there's a white Bronco going down the I-405 freeway with a gaggle of police cars behind it, following at about 45 to 50 miles an hour. And the reporters are saying that O.J. Simpson allegedly is in the back of this white Bronco. And no one knows what's happening with OJ at this point in time, but at the same time, they're reading what is allegedly is a suicide note from him. And I started thinking, man, this guy has been a Hall of Fame football player. He's Heisman Trophy winner. He's jumping over stuff in the Hertz commercials. He's been on Naked Gun. He's an announcer for the NFL. He's got so much that's going on. Why is he contemplating ending his life? And it was in that moment that I believe God spoke to me and said, it's going to get worse before it gets better, but you're going to make it through this.
Mm.
And that was my turning point of not that I had the thoughts of checking out, but that was never going to be an option. It was going to get worse before it got better, and I was going to go through the hard part. I was
Yes.
going to go through it.
When we go through the fires, when we go through the pain and the struggle, we, God willing, have someone to go through it with. Who was someone who was walking with you through this time?
It was definitely Alice, my wife, and we have been probably together 6 years altogether, but 3 of those 6 years probably together half the time because in the military, I was leaving for a training camp where I went to the Desert Storm. And so it's very hard on military families
Totally.
that are serving. It's very hard, very difficult. She poured everything into my recovery. In fact, she lost her job because of it. She was there with me and the job that was she was working in West Memphis, Arkansas. We're geographically separate. I couldn't bring my family with me for command sponsorship, and I'm stationed in Germany. And that job called to fire her for being gone too long taking care of me.
Mm.
Like, man, thank you for your service, ma'am. And so she comes over to the hospital, gets me out of bed, puts me in a wheelchair, wheels me out to an inaccessible playground where I'm parked, forced to watch my wife and son play on the swings, and I can't push myself out of that chair. And that's the first time I felt disabled.
You were Army, you're
Yep.
combat ready, you're an athlete, you're an Olympian for all intents and purposes. You're a stud, man, physically, you're a physical specimen. And now you're at the playground, seated, unable to get up and push your son. How do you cope with losing that identity and ultimately step it into the next one?
It wasn't like an overnight thing, right? I knew in the moment that I would eventually come through this piece, but there was this grief I had to go through that I was struggling with. And it was kind of looking out about experience to see that I had to go through this, but being living in the moment at the same time. And there was something that John Jr. said, and I share this in my keynote speeches, is he jumps off the swing. He's Al's pushing him. Now she's by my side, wrapped around me. And he jumps off the swing and he says, "Hey, mom, dad, you see my big jump?" And as he pushed himself in between myself and Alice, I'm realizing that he's just validated me as his father. Whatever's going on with me, nothing's really changed for him. I'm still his dad. He still sees me as dad. So who told me that something has changed, right? So these are all the things I'm beginning to unpack in my head. I was thinking about, man, I'm now have this disability. I'm now deformed. Will my wife still want to stay with me? And when I think about that question now, it's really not about her leaving, or that's the wrong question or the wrong statement. The question I'm asking is really, am I still desirable?
Right.
And those are the harder questions that I think that we have to ask ourselves instead of forecasting onto others. We can take that. So it took a while for me to really embrace it. I would wear long pants or I kind of hide it or something, and I'd be a little ashamed of the amputation, and more so because of who I was and how I identified as as you said, the military service member, the Olympic trials qualifier, and how are my teammates going to see me? How will my military folks see me? Do I still have a job in the military? All these things were hitting my like a ton of bricks.
So talk about that. How do you begin rebuilding from who you once were and who you thought you were and who your identity was wrapped up in into recognizing maybe my son is right. Maybe I'm enough.
Yeah.
Maybe the more I question where will she stay, the more she'll question it too. How do you begin to recognize that you're valuable and worthy and enough as is?
I think the process is the same for everybody, but it takes different lengths of time to come to those realization points. I also believe having people in your corner during that time that will not allow you to fail. So it's very important to have a base of either friends or family that can really give it to you straight and then give you the runway in which to try new things. For me, it comes out as that resilience action model. And so the first part is the reckoning. The reckoning is I'm not going to go back to the way it used to be. But then again, it never goes back to the way it used to be. We never can go back in time. I can't change something in the past. So a question that people ask is, would you go back and ever change it? I said, I can't. I can't change that. I don't even know what the outcomes would be from that. It's a fictitious question. It's like saying who's better, Michael Jordan, LeBron. They don't play against each other. There's no era in time where they actually can play with one another. So I think a
My
better
sons and I
question is,
disagree on the answer to that. They think it's LeBron. I think it's Michael. That's for a different podcast.
that's right. Um, yeah, because you can't have LeBron without Michael, right? But you can't have Mike without Pistol Pete. So, right, it's just different eras.
That's right.
Then the better question, I think, is where are you now? And where can you forecast yourself to be 10, 20, 15 years from now, 30 years from now? And then see yourself there and build a roadmap back to that place from where you are right now, because you can do something about that. And the minute that you begin to see the destination, to have the hope that you're not going to go back to the way it used to be, you've hurdled the reckoning. Now you're in the revision. So now the harder part of the model, the second hardest part, because now you're beginning to cast a new vision. I'm not going to be an Olympic class athlete. I'm going to be a Paralympic athlete. But that didn't come right away. I didn't even know about what Paralympics were. So you're building these parallel paths that are all around you. It's a point of discovery. You don't know that this is even there. So all of a sudden I'm going to write with two hands. I don't even have any hands. Baseball comes in the mailbox. You'll get another one. Just sign your name to this one, right? Write a thank you note back. And so there's a new opportunity that happens that would never have existed if you didn't go through that fire. So we begin to revision what could be possible with us, right? And as we begin to revision that, we have these forces that are holding us back. Other people who believe for us what we can or cannot do, which is based upon what they believe they could or could not do if they were in your situation. Then we have society. Society has dictated to us how we're supposed to act and show up. Was it when I saw the Walt Disney movie Peter Pan and Captain Hook's the villain, the antagonist in the movie, and he's got a hook for his hand, but was bit off by TikTok the crocodile. He's scaring the Lost Boys. But wait a minute, I'm now an amputee. Am I the villain? People see me as the villain. Think about it. We see Jason, Freddy Krueger, Hannibal Lecter, and all these people that are quote unquote demented, mental disabilities, and we believe them every October 31st. And then when the school shooting happens, or something happens around that takes us away from that, the first people we want to blame is it's all those people with mental health. Because we've scared ourselves, decided to cast blame on others instead of taking the blame on ourselves. That's very difficult to move away from society. And third in that is I'm the one that has to hurdle. I've had the world's best hurdle coaches. None of them ever attacked a hurdle for me. I'm the one that has to go over that hurdle. And that's when we get into what we talked about earlier, the commitment. And I won't rehash that, but the commitment begins with a rebirth. And the rebirth is very hard because now you're no longer the expert, you're vulnerable, and you have to relearn the process so you can be an expert again.
So you have this model in your mind, but you've learned it by practicing it through your life. What was it like for you representing the United States in the Olympics?
Yeah, I didn't even know what the Paralympic Games were. And so, long story short, I went to the Paralympic swim trials because I put a mark on the wall. My coach and I put a mark on the wall. I didn't think I was ever going to make a Paralympic team, but I made the Paralympic standard to make the trials, and I needed a 106 flat to make the team. And I swam in the 100-meter freestyle at 106.01. I was ecstatic because I started like at 117. I was like, oh my gosh, I just can't believe I just did this, lost all this weight. I feel good about myself, my body, I'm back. I feel good again. And the coach from Catholic University called me up and he says, "Why did you leave before the team was announced?" And I said, "Well, I didn't make it. I didn't make the standard, but have a great time down in Atlanta." He said, "Well, in the 100-meter freestyle, when you flip turn at the other side, that actually counts as a bona fide time. And you were underneath the Paralympic standard when you did the flip turn. So we picked you up for the relay." I said, "You mean I'm going to the Paralympic Games, not as a 400-meter hurdler, but as a Paralympic swimmer?" And that just blew me away. Now, there I saw athletes running and jumping with artificial legs. I decided to have a leg made for running. And 4 years later, I went to Sydney, Australia after learning how to run an artificial leg again and won the silver medal in the long jump in Sydney and then took fifth in the 100 meters and 200-meter dashes.
What I love more than your medals and the flag flying behind you is the fact that you began to take those steps in the first place. What inspired you to begin moving from grief to reinvention? How do you stop looking down at this missing leg and who you could have been and begin truly rejoicing in who you already are and what you can do next? Just in your own mind, like what is that when you flip the switch like that and you recognize, man, that leg was not me, just a little bit of me. What was it
Yeah.
like for you to recognize that you're more than that?
I've
And,
been thinking
John,
about
the reason
this.
I'm
Yeah.
asking is because
Yeah.
all of us, dude,
Yeah.
have the things that we think are us. It is that person in our lives. And that's who completes us, as Jerry Maguire says. So now
Yeah.
Jerry's more because of her, or it's the
Right.
job, or it's the wealth, or it's the looks, or it's the kids, or it's a million things. And then that thing leaves us, and now we're done. But you lost the thing you were. You're an athlete, man. You're a combat veteran, and you lost it all, and yet you became something more.
There was a point that kind of encapsulated all of it for me, and it became an aha moment for me, which encaptures what Alice did, my faith, John Jr., my parents, my cousin, all of that in one. And I realized I was preparing for a TEDx talk, and I was going to call the curator and say, "I don't got it. Cancel me out." I'm saying the same thing everybody else is saying. It was my faith and family friendships that equaled my freedom, right? I wasn't saying anything. It was just the same stuff that everybody else was saying. I was in a heated argument over in lunch with a friend of mine. He said, "But you did do all this stuff. You won the medal. You started these programs, and so you did overcome it." And I said, "If I would have overcome my amputation, I would have my leg back." And when I said those words, he said, "Oh, right." And then I said, "Huh, I think there's something there." Right. So I began testing that on people, and everybody kind of did that same Scooby Doo look. No, that's right. So I was saying something that was the same, but a little bit different. What people were thinking, but they weren't actually articulating out loud. And in that moment, I understand now that that's Alice and saying, "We're going to get through this together." That's John Jr. saying, "Hey, Dad," and I have a responsibility to them as our family unit to let them advance forward, that the family is going to move forward, that we're not going to be held back by this. So that was number one. And it was faith. It was faith in that even though I could not see what was going to happen in my life, I knew something was coming. So I better prepare for what God is about to bring in my life because I don't know, have any clue what this thing actually is. Then I think the third is I didn't know about these opportunities. But because, like you said, I began taking the steps, investing in others, breathing life into others, these other opportunities began to open up for me. Because as we begin to plant seeds, those seeds begin to take root and grow, and it produces an abundance for us behind. So whatever we're planting, we get great
So
seed,
good.
we get great produce and harvest behind us. It doesn't matter what you plant, right? So if you're planting seeds of prosperity or you're planting seeds of help and oxygen, you're going to get that follows after you.
Right on.
If you're planting seeds of discourse and disdain, you're going to get a field and crop of that. So it's just a law that's in the land. So we can tell people by the seeds they're planting what's growing after and springing up after them. And that's what I always wanted to ensure that whatever seed I was planting or planting in somebody else, it was going to grow good fruit from them. because I don't want to be responsible for somebody growing bad fruit. I'm not saying I'm perfect. What I'm saying is that my intention is
Right.
to have the oxygen that's been breathed into me by my creator, that my duty, obligation, responsibility is to breathe life into others. Because anything else is death.
Mm.
Plants either growing or dying. There's no in between. Either you watered it today or you didn't. How are you watering? How are you breathing into other people? And that became my life's mission. My mantra is to put that life in others. It's inspiration. Inspiration is from the Latin word inspiro, which means to breathe into. And I believe that inspiration is the catalyst to motivation. Motivation in turn causes actions. Actions lead us to transformational results. And those results, they re-inspire us, or they allow someone else that's watching that process to catch their own vision.
Ooh, baby. So we have to begin moving toward the tape at the end of this race before we shift into what we call the Live Inspired 7. I understand that you once surprised your wife with a skydiving trip. How did that go?
Nice. Yeah, I know she's a daredevil. She likes to do things. The first time I knew she was a daredevil is they like to go quote unquote snake hunting out in the backwoods of Arkansas and water moccasins and stuff. They're down there trying to get them with the hose. I'm like, what is this? I'm a city kid from Chicago. You know, I heard her say in passing that she wanted to jump out of perfectly good aircraft. So I booked her a skydiving trip. As we were friending from Virginia. We're now newly out in Colorado Springs. Went up to Longmont to a skydiving place, and I went with her. Didn't know how it was going to go, and it was the instructor didn't make it any easier by saying, if this doesn't work, the last thing that's going to be on your mind is my mind, and it's like, and out the door we went, and it was the most amazing experience that we up to that point really I think it shared together that we could talk about, and she was ready to go again.
So the final question before we shift gears is, for me, my answer to the question I'm about to ask you is when I spoke to about 80 executives in Northwest Australia in a little town called Broome. I mean, there's like 8 street lights in the whole area, and they shut off once the sun sets. So it's pitch black, and I'm looking up at the Southern Cross, and later on that evening, speak to these executives. And at the end of the night, as you know, you're hugging people and saying goodbye, I remember thinking, I can't believe this is part of my life. Like, how did any of this come to pass, man? So as a speaker, John Register, share a time in your life when you recognize, like, dude, I can't believe that I get to do this work.
There are many times that I just have to pinch myself. um, the one that's coming up for me most right now is really a more of a philosophy, and whenever somebody asks me what's the best place you've ever spoken or something, I always say the next one.
Right.
And where that comes from is Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm. Didn't want to go, submitted to it. God told me it was going to be for something totally different, and he was totally right. Uh, but at the same time, I bought a book, a kitab. In Arabic, the book is called Kitab. Kitabi is possessed means my book. So I began learning a little bit of Arabic. So I learned things like Salam alaikum, wa alaikum salam, kef halak, quis, sadigi, French. And I knew probably about 15 words at the time that I could just string together in a easy setting, tea, chai, all these things. And I was on guard duty and saying compound, the Saudi Arabian National Guard compound, with my Saudi friends. And a guy pulled up, and I would practice on them, and that guy pulled up, and I didn't know what was going on. They just jumping all around. I'm like, I got my hand on my sidearm, like, what happened? Am I to jump off? What's going on? And it turns out to be one of the Saudi princes. And he lines everybody up to shake their hands for being on duty. And as he's going down the line, I jumped in line. And he comes to me and he kind of says, well, one of these things doesn't look like the other. Different uniform, dude. And I said, Salam alaikum. He says, and I said, hello, how are you? Quiz, I'm well. We had some, exchanges maybe about 3 more, and I was out. I was done.
Right.
That was it. And what happened next, John, is he opened up in English and began to have a dialogue with me. why are you learning Arabic? You know what? And so I was being an ambassador for the United States or for my country or just for humanity. And I said, I just want to learn more about your culture. I'm here in your country. I want to understand more about who you are and what makes you all tick. And after that, he left, and I could do no wrong in those Saudi guards' eyes anymore. I was brought in for tea. I was brought in for akil, to eat. I was for the meal, sitting down, breaking bread with them in the nighttime after they would knock off. So you did the 80 executives. Here I am in a tent, eating with a plate of food with our hands. The most intimate thing that you can do is to share and break bread and me. And so that what that taught me is that every single engagement that I go into, I need to be breaking bread with these folks to offer and to learn from. It's not about what I'm pontificating from the stage, from the platform. It's about learning in that process. That's why in my keynotes, what I'm doing is I am improving the audience. I want all of us to learn in this moment because it's
Right.
arrogance for me to go in to any organization and say, I know, I got the answer for you. I know what you need to do. This person, this woman, this guy's been there for 15, 20 years, and you're going to tell them their job? Are you kidding me? We have to go in with, like I said, I go with my resilience action model. How does this apply to you? How do you see this working in your world? Help me understand that. And I think that's what gets us down the road in every single engagement. And that's how I go show up every single time. So there's not just one moment, it's all those moments. And I think it goes back to that one moment in time back in Saudi.
Mm, man, great answer. You told me at the top of the podcast that I may not know your uncle. I did my recon on you. I know about Uncle Gloucester.
Uncle Glass, oh my gosh, dude, awesome.
So, and one of the other things he taught you was not only to be bold and how to build up a pretty strong speaker lineup, like Martin Luther King Jr. would be a pretty solid pickup,
Pretty solid.
but he also taught you how to argue both sides of equations.
Yeah.
And in this country and in our political system, we have become expert at hating on the people who look, act, vote, worship differently than you and I. And there's wisdom in loving them enough to learn their perspective and argue for them, even at first when we disagree. So I think what Uncle Gloucester taught you as a child around the dinner table, you modeled in Saudi Arabia with the prince. Pretty cool, John. So, my friend, we have 7 questions that tether all of our guests together. We call them the Live Inspired 7. Question number 1, what was the most impactful book you ever read?
Uh, I would say it's leadership and self-deception.
Oh, yeah.
And the second to that part is the anatomy of peace. And the third part to that book is outward mindset. That trilogy really helped me. And they just wrote another book, so it's kind of trumped all the other stuff. So so now I just
They're
yeah
gifted, man. It's a great concept. What's
yeah.
one positive characteristic or one trait that you possessed as a little kid growing up in St. Louis or Chicago that you wish you exhibited as brilliantly today as a leader in Colorado Springs?
I think it's the risk in entrepreneurship. I had a lemonade stand, and the guy told me, "Hey, if you really want market share, because somebody else was beating me at one street up before they would come from off the L Street in Chicago." He said, "Take your little red flyer wagon up there with your lemonade and go to the L stop. You'll get them going both ways." And I think I have more, more of that concept of business sense.
Well, yeah, I think you got a fair amount now, man. But yes, I hear you. If your home caught fire and all living things are out and you have an opportunity of running back in and grabbing one item, what's that one physical thing, John, you would come racing back outside with?
Probably my photograph of Alice, myself, John Jr., Ashley. That's probably the one thing. I mean, that's our family picture. And as you say that, we need to take another family picture. Yeah, they're my heartbeat.
If you could sit on a bench on a gorgeous day and have a long conversation with anyone living or deceased, who would you like to have right next to you?
Yeah, first person that's coming to my mind is Dr. King, but I'm also thinking about Gandhi
Hmm.
and just the wisdom that both of those had for humanity. And so that'd be probably tossing between those two.
Well,
That's
man,
pick
it's
one.
a wide bench. There's room for all three
Wide pick.
fellows to have a huddle.
Yeah.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
Recently, the best advice has been to not play small, to not play small.
Mm. You won't like this next question because I know you hate looking back, but here we go. If you could whisper some wisdom to yourself at age 20, what would you tell that version of you?
Stay authentic to yourself. You are designed like a fingerprint.
Mm.
You're the only person in this world who has your DNA. You are special. You are created with no one else that is like you. So define your purpose now and what you're going to do with your life.
Gosh, man, you needed that. And everyone listening to our conversation needs that. You are designed with something beautiful in mind. You are designed uniquely and perfectly in the image of God.
Right.
Quit comparing yourself to everybody else.
Right.
So what an important reminder. So John Register, it has been said, my friend, that all great people can have their lives summed up in one sentence. How would you like yours to read?
He inspired me.
John, you have run the good race. You have impacted lives along the race. And I'm grateful that you've impacted mine, my friends, because not only did you do that, but now you've impacted tens of thousands of lives around the world through this channel. We thank you for being part of our friendship circle. We thank you for being part of our Live Inspired family. And we thank you for reminding us that in spite of what has been amputated and the mistakes we've made along the way, that God is still God, the foundation's still firm, and the best is yet to come.
I appreciate you, John O'Leary, more than you know. Thanks for taking time, but also thank you for taking time to do your homework and your research. This has been a fantastic firepower discussion. And so I'm so glad that we are in each other's lives.
My friends, you're hearing the story of my buddy, John Register. My name is John O'Leary, and today is our day. What a gift. Live inspired.
Keeley Companies was started almost 50 years ago by the one and only Larry Keeley. What started as a small family-owned paving company in St. Louis has grown to a nationally known full-service construction, development, and restoration partner. Larry the Legend, as he is affectionately known, has been a part of this growth every step of the way and continues to provide guidance as his son Rusty, my buddy, drives their vision and achieves results on purpose. His unwavering foundation of a family culture with a focus on people has gotten Keeley Companies to where they are today, and their journey is truly just beginning. To learn more about Larry the Legend and Keeley Companies, check them out at KeeleyCompanies.com.